Well, the
Mm.
topic I placed was the one for villains.
Oh yeah, villains.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
you did. Yeah, you are.
Yeah.
Julio. I need to do an introduction at some point. I'll think of one some next time.
I
But
think
anyways,
we should just
today-
introduce ourselves.
Okay, cool. Hello
So-
everyone. My name is Nathaniel. I'm a writer. We've been doing like a couple of streams of the Lounge podcast. So we just basically talk about writing and writing, discussion, anime, just kind of anything writing related, fantasy writing related. Today we have Kite.
Hello, everybody.
Kite
How
with us.
are we doing?
Okay, I got Beat.
yeah.
We got Fake. What? Got Hex,
Hey, what's up?
and we got Sean Lester.
Heyo.
Ooh, so today we got a few topics. I think depends on who wants to go first. We've got a few. We've got like about the villains and about squash fights. That sounds quite
like-
I'd say
I think we could start with villains, since it's
Pretty
gonna
easy
be
topic.
quite
Yeah.
an
Yeah,
easy
okay.
topic and
Yeah,
quite
we got that.
interesting.
Oh, cool.
By the way,
Yeah, we got that.
may I do a bit of introduction, since I was the one that.
Of course.
Oh yeah,
Yes,
by all means.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, hello there, Bit Talking, and well, usually in my books I work with villains, with the bad guys, and usually they end up being quite the big thing in the story, and the newest book I am working on features villainous main character, so I placed a topic that was about how to work on your villain, more or less, some tips to help out, and tips about henchmen and realistic villains that we could discuss here. In which line we could reach the realistic part, or which part we would go too far in realism and end up doing something too hard for our own hero to manage to win. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll start with an example. It's the main character I'm working on, Evan. Literally, Evan follows really strongly the part of realistic villains, since he's not meant to lose. But I always try to keep a small weakness that will always ensure that the hero can try something against him, or those that go against Evan will do something that will be a trouble for him in the long run or in the short run. Mainly by adding some realistic mistakes, like Evan is really super curious about trying out things, about experimentation, so usual, and is really passive. And well, you can notice that I place psychological limits and misgivings of a character that makes it do mistakes on the long run. I think that many of us have seen bad villains working on games, especially one being Ultima. So, and you see how he works with a henchman, that literally he just places copies of himself for limited reasons. So I thought that this topic would be worth talking about with you all.
Okay.
Okay.
So I think basically the gist of it is kind of like how to write, I guess, compelling villains, I guess realistic villains, in a story, and just I guess different ways you can go about it. And your example is just like your character being actually your character's the main character in it, but you kind of you kind of write him as a villain, and then you're talking about like the weaknesses he has to kind of counterbalance him being a overbearing force, because I guess a villain's meant to be overbearing. I guess is that the gist of it?
Well, in case of Evan, is literally overbearing, overthinking, and he's really good at planning.
Hmm.
His
Okay, I
his
think I get it.
specialty is planning.
Okay.
He doesn't
yeah.
go.
Could you remind what the weakness was again? Like what the weakness was for Evan?
His weakness is literally his curiosity, and that tends to become a sort of being extremely passive.
So over curious kind of stops him from actually being more active and doing stuff.
Okay, I think
Besides
I
the
think I
thing
get.
for- yeah.
I think I get this now.
So it's like a double-sided coin. Then, like curiosity is good, but it's also what it makes him passive. I guess something like that.
Yeah, I certainly like in my experience of like consuming lots of media, curiosity can often lead to a villain's downfall. Whether it's like, probably I don't know. The first one that comes into mind, which probably isn't a great example, would be Sasuke Aizen from Bleach.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And obviously, like I will just say I'm a very big fan of Bleach. It's probably one of my main inspirations. That being said, I do accept there are a lot of things wrong with Bleach. But that doesn't limit the fact that Sasuke Aizen is literally one of my favorite antagonists, and that is literally because this guy is ludicrously overpowered. It's demonstrated at the end when he's introduced as a villain. But what I find him so compelling, and it's going back to Hector's topic, is that he's meticulous at planning, and he doesn't rely solely on his overwhelming power. It's always about predicting how his enemy is going to react, then use his Kyoika Suigetsu to sort of manipulate things and get things exactly the way he wants it. I think one of my favorite examples is during the Battle of Katakura Town, where everyone thinks they beat him, only for Ichigo to then just yell at the top of his lungs, "What are you guys doing?" And then the illusion shattered, and you just saw his old lieutenant Momo there stabbed by Hitsugaya. Shinji was the first to react, basically looking at where Momo should have been, and instead Aizen was there. And and furious, he just asked, "When did you do it? When did you swap with her?" And this is like one of my favorite lines. He said, "Good question. When did I use Kyoika Suigetsu? After all, it can control all 5 senses." Shinji got even more irritated, said, "We know that. I'm asking when you did it. Now consider this. When do you think I wasn't using Kyoika Suigetsu?" Essentially, he turned the entire battle against them, and then everyone, and particularly Hitsugaya, was flown in a rage, and then Aizen just took advantage of the confusion and wiped everyone out. I'd say that's like my favorite Sasuke Aizen moment, and what sort of makes but it's sort of his particularly his curiosity with Ichigo in sort of like I said, Bleach's story isn't the most cohesive narrative ever, but it was essentially he always considered himself the top of everything. It was when Ichigo began to completely overpower him, you saw that his facade completely break down. It was during the final fight where Ichigo managed to cut him deeply, and then asked Aizen, "Why did you run away?" And then Aizen just completely flew into a full rage and unleashed everything he had to destroy Ichigo, which unleashed his final Getsuga Tensha, which didn't finish him off. And believing him he was victorious, tried to finish it, and then realized, and the Hoikoku began to reject him, where he then realized Kisuke had thrown him directly. He had fallen directly into Kisuke's trap.
Yeah,
And then
it's actually God. Oh,
and
sorry.
in his
Go on.
final rant, he spits vile at Kisuke, saying, "How could you? You're a smart man. You're probably my equal. How can you? How? So why are you working for that thing?" Kisuke saying, "Because we need that thing to keep everything together." And then his final rant was, "That's just the logic of a loser. Only someone like me can truly understand the world and not accept it for how it is." And okay, yeah, that's probably the end of my rant. But yeah, as you can tell, like Aizen's probably my favorite villain of all shonen anime. Yeah,
Nah,
Um,
he's really up there. Yeah, I think. But what seems so interesting is just like he's so compelling.
So I kind of wanted to throw my hat in since we are talking about villains in general, as well as working on them, as well as tips regarding the concept of realistic villains. So I might catch some flack for this one, but I do feel that this does need to be mentioned. The thing with realism by default is that it really depends on what you lean in on the concept of what you consider what is realistic. Because the thing is, one of the fundamental aspects of villains, or just writing characters in general, is that they're going to represent some degree of an extreme idea that you might have in your head, or maybe a concept that may be limited in your own scope. So, in that regard, usually whenever I'm crafting my own villains, I don't necessarily just think about what their backstory is. I try to think about what they're supposed to represent in the grand scheme of the story. Typically, the villain or the antagonist, not really using the terms interchangeably here, since there is a difference between the two. The villain is the ultimate threat. The antagonist is someone who's fundamentally against the protagonist. So, in the context of your story, you need to figure out what your themes are. What are you trying to say? What is the ultimate goal of the story? The villain is supposed to be the antithesis of what you're chasing. Or they could basically be very much an amalgamation of everything that the story is meant to comment on. Hold on a moment. They can possibly be an amalgamation of everything the story is supposed to be commenting on. So whether or not that is an ultimate good or evil, that is up to the villain. The villain themselves does not necessarily have to be the typical evil mustache twirling type. What they could fundamentally be instead is something of a twisted amalgamation of what the protagonist is, or what they could end up becoming if they were to end up choosing a different path. So while you're working on a villain, the first thing what I try to stress is think about who they are in relation to your protagonist, and think about what they are in relation to your themes. Because that is what's going to make the difference, and that's what's going to make them stick in the reader's heads. There's a reason why so many people, when they talk about their favorite movies, they always talk about what the villain was doing. Because they're the ones who end up driving the plot 9 times out of 10, and your protagonist, as well as all your other characters, are reacting to what the villain ends up doing. So what you'll want to do is perhaps not necessarily create a realistic villain. You want to be able to understand what's going on, mind you. You want to get what's going on some level. But at the same time, what you do need to focus on top of it, maybe not necessarily be complexity, but just what does this villain mean in the grand scheme? What do they mean in terms of the theme? What do they mean to the protagonist? That's usually where I end up staying on the subject.
And allow me to add a small thing. That this point is really good. It's one of those I wanted to showcase, especially the part of realistic, but the view you want to add to the villain. But there are exceptions, and there are two that I find that are wonderful in games. One is Happy Chaos of Guilty Gear.
Ah, yes, of course.
And this is why I wanted to do this topic, because he's entirely the counterpoint exactly to this point, in which literally he chooses to be the antagonist to get the future he wants. To be honest,
Yeah, like
he wants to cause the chaos he wants to create, and I find him really interesting because he always treats it as a story, and usually even when he's fighting himself, there's even an interaction that is, oh, I'll be the antagonist, and then the other Happy Chaos says, then I'll be the protagonist.
right, because in this case, I can't really expect viewers who are tuning in to exactly know what happens in Guilty Gear, but just to kind of give a vague idea as to what to expect, the character, fundamentally speaking, is a bit of a goof. He's very much the jester, pointing towards a joke and hoping that the audience ends up laughing. But what ends up happening with this character, or just with this type of villain in general, is that they're very much a trickster in the sense. Their very existence doesn't really make much sense in the context of what the characters know. But he's someone who's always been there. He's the ultimate end. Like, your villain can represent an ultimate end, or just a gateway to something that you thought that you thought made sense, but fundamentally it doesn't make sense. That's why this dynamic between what is real and what is false doesn't necessarily need to apply to a villain whose very nature is meant to be fundamentally contradictory to a set of morals or a worldview that these characters are meant to have. Hence his name, Happy Chaos. He really isn't supposed to make any literal sense to anyone. He does what he wants because this is just the kind of person he is. This is the kind of life he lives. Now, granted, you can find the layers to the character, but I feel that free-flowing portrayal of just unbridled madness in the pursuit of God knows what can really help to make someone that you want to watch all the way through. You don't necessarily agree with what they're doing, but you are having a damn good time watching them because they're having just as much fun as you are at that point.
Yeah, one character he does remind, because I really love those sorts of like just maniacs. One that comes to mind is Higgs from Death Stranding, played by Troy Baker. Basically, he just this is a guy you can't really work out because he just shows up, monologues, teleports around you, and then just summons a large BT and just says, "Have fun."
Yeah, exactly.
You wanted a boss fight? Here he is. Have fun.
Because, like, I do feel like you do have to ground them to a point where there has to be some semblance of how their logic does work, however. Because you have to remember, at the end of the day, they're just as much as characters as everyone else. Some of their logic or some of their beliefs does have to be grounded in some degree of reality. Maybe not necessarily in a quote unquote realistic sense, but we understand why they're doing it. Like, for example, why is the villain always trying to summon some ancient evil? Like, what exactly does he get out of summoning an evil dragon that's going to genocide half the planet? Like, why are they trying to do that? Is there a particular reason why they want to summon a genocide machine? Because the thing is, if you make the world uninhabitable, it implies that it's going to be very difficult for you yourself to live there. So what I'm not really trying to tell you is you don't have to necessarily forego the concept of some degree of grounded reality. But there needs to be a reason as to why the big bad wants to summon the ultimate evil. There needs to be some reason why the bad guy needs to get a hold of this ancient trinket. Now, sometimes it might not necessarily be like a one-dimensional thing. Hell, sometimes you don't even need to answer this stuff. Sometimes there might not necessarily need to be an answer. But sometimes it really does help to actually know it, which again, why are you trying to summon an evil dragon, my guy? I need to at least have some vague idea as to why you're doing it.
Yeah, I was kind of about to kind of say something along that line of, it's good to know, but like, I think more importantly, it's good for the writer themselves to know. Whether they reveal the reason to the reader, it can kind of depend on story. Like, I mean, even like take part of what we're kind of talking about. Like, he on the face of it, he's just kind of like he just wants to watch the world burn. I mean, that's good enough reason. You
Yeah.
don't need to get super detailed into the reason. You could have maybe a proper backstory in the back of your head as the writer, but the reader doesn't necessarily need to see it. And if you write it right, and I don't know, like, yeah, if you do your due diligence, it should work out.
I feel like
it can really go both ways. It's context sensitive.
Yeah,
And,
I feel like
and about the evil being, now comes the second character I was talking about before. That I said there are two characters I wanted to show up when I started talking about Happy Chaos. That is the most underrated, in my opinion, Final Fantasy villain, Ardyn.
So,
I wouldn't
I
wouldn't say he's underrated. I'd say the game he's in is not very good, but he
the problem isn't really with Arden.
It's-
It's simply just to state what that game ended up being.
Yeah.
Because I loved Arden. He is like the highlight of Final Fantasy 15.
I agree.
Pretty much
yeah,
I
to the
agree.
actual game itself.
I agree, but this is why I'm saying he's the underrated one, because many people say, "Oh no, all the entire game is crap," but no. The problem is that Ardyn was too good of a villain and too much of a realistic villain compared to Noctis, the hero.
I think it's
This
that.
is-
Also, I think I agree, which I think is more like, again, I think it's the writing. I think there was so much more.
Yeah,
I could write about 15 for a whole month, but I think there's so much more about Noctis and the backstory of Noctis that just wasn't revealed. And then the writing just got really. It's just like he just became, you are the warrior of light. In this game, is meant to be fantasy based on reality.
It got lazy. It got lazy.
I wouldn't say it got
because-
lazy. The problem because 15 had an absolutely cursed development.
Yeah, it is.
The point where they actually
Yeah.
the thing with like a lot of
That's
people
it.
it's not a case of they got lazy. It's because they needed to ship something with what they had, because this was a 10-year.
Because the original one for Ardyn was so much better, because and
I
it was
bet.
shown, which is the worst of it.
I bet.
Final Fantasy's got some good villains. Like, I think, like, because I play like Final Fantasy 14, and particularly because you said, because brought on like why you have villains trying to destroy the world. In 14, there's one of the major antagonists, particularly for up until Endwalker, is what's known as the Asians, who sort of like for most of the game are just there causing chaos. It isn't until Shadowbringers where you get to actually know who they are, and particularly through the lens of the expansion's main antagonist, Emmett Selk. And there's a reason, like, particularly for those who play 14, why he's become like the villain of Final Fantasy 14. Simply because he is something of a jester, because he's lived so long, but he, at the very least, tries to give the Scions and your Warrior of Light, in my case it was based on Alyssa, reasons as to why they're doing this and what his world was. But also iterated, yes, I don't care about any of you, I just want to get my world back, no matter the cost. Which made sort of the final confrontation between Emmett Selk and your Warrior of Light one of like the most powerful moments in that game. Particularly his final word being, "Remember how we once lived," before he disappeared. And playing to like Eternal Wind from Final Fantasy 3.
So that kind of ties back to what I mentioned earlier. You got to think about what the villain means in the context of the themes of the story that you're writing. Because you can argue the point of that villain is what happens when you are too stuck in the past to consider what the future beyond you is going to look like. You cannot accept the world changing, so you try to turn the clock back. You don't really care who you end up hurting. It's just as though that the world goes back in a way in which it makes sense to you. And of course, that might be a bit more relevant to some people more than others nowadays. But the
So
reason
he's a boomer. He's literally a
you can
boomer.
say
Back in my day.
very much, very much a cranky, angry boomer who refuses to grow. But that is actually very terrifying, and which again I've been avoiding this term, but it is a very realistic problem that most people can point to, because there are those who do wish to turn the clock back because things are advancing too quickly. But you see, that's the fundamental thing about a villain in that sense. They are fundamentally against the very concept of humans changing, and are very much against the very concept of the human spirit. The human spirit is capable of evolving through adversity. But the trouble is, the villain has now chosen a life of comfort, which cannot apply to those who want to continuously evolve. But the thing is, stagnation, depending on who you ask, can be its own degree of peace. Because you know how things are going to go. If you keep things in this direction, nothing bad from your point of view may end up happening. But the thing is, the world around you is burning because it's not changing. You're not producing new ideas. You're not producing new concepts. So what you have here is a villain who has become a force of nature. They still have their own character, but they're a force of nature that refuses to change and refuses to allow the world to adapt beyond them. That's why you will then have so basically they represent a very twisted order. They represent law in the most literal and consistent sense. But that's when your protagonist comes in to completely break that order. So then, in that sense, your villain is not the agent of chaos. Your villain is the agent of order. Your protagonist becomes the destroyer of order. Your protagonist literally becomes chaos.
You can actually it's interesting because I ain't going through 14, but it has a lot of parallels to even like One Piece, where the government, they're keeping things still. They're trying to basically stop. They're raising the history from before and trying to keep things in the status quo. Where Luffy is just this chaotic guy. He's changing status quo. So it's really interesting, like where the villain and where the hero is. I mean, even in One Piece, actually, it goes back really well. Where's the line between the villains and the pirates? That there's good pirates, and then it's just
like my favorite example. Like I know I like keep throwing out examples, but my favorite one's like Lucci from CP9, like that, because like that's like the ultimate example of basically a figure of law and order driven to the absolute extreme, where he will literally kill anyone.
As long as he has the authority to do it, he doesn't care. He will kill anyone. If it's a child, he doesn't care. As long as he's been told that that he is allowed to do it.
And that's Oh, go on, James. Sorry.
Yeah, that's sort of like it. Yeah, what makes the fight between him and Luffy like one of the most intense battles in One Piece, because there's obviously like the actual fighting, which is in at that stage of the manga absolutely brutal. There's also like just this clash between Luffy, who just refuses to accept basically this messed up world where they destroyed an entire island just to bury a secret, and then branded a child, one of the most wanted women in the world, and are now trying to take her away from him against this guy who will like who basically literally stands as a wall between him and breaking that down, which makes like the final Gunjet Gatlin one of the most satisfying KOs in that manga.
Yeah.
No, I agree.
So I haven't pitched in, guys. Let me speak, please.
Let
me. No.
Please,
but
please shut me up. Please shut me up.
No, it's fine. But what was it? There was a lot of discussion of Final Fantasy, and the thing is, I have not played any of the Final Fantasy games.
Right. This is I kind of want to mention this not just for mine and Hex's sake, but just for everyone in general. We should probably make sure that we keep our analysis and comments as general as possible, because the problem is we can't really expect everyone to really know half the stuff that we do as far as our media choices are concerned. So we should try to keep things as general as possible for their sake.
Or at the very least, explain like briefly, just just briefly.
Yeah.
What you talk?
Yeah.
But man,
It was
I'm
what I
also
was doing with Chaos and it was what I was doing with Chaos and Arden, more or less trying to explain a bit about them.
yeah.
Oh,
Exactly.
okay. Yeah, go.
Yeah. But what was it? I'm a bit lost because I have a lot of I have some things to talk about. Because this is originally about like what was it? Realistic villains, but then I think we moved on to just believable villains in a way.
Right.
No,
Believable.
No, first we started with the part of working on your villain, and so
Yeah,
we
working on
we
our
were
villain.
talking about
Hmm.
working on the villain because
yeah.
I did the 3 points especially to do it. First, working on your villain, then the henchmen that will go with that villain, and then finish with realistic villains.
Yeah, that's the thing. Because my thoughts are now randomized. Because first it was working with the villains, then realistic villains, and then I guess villains in general. But I'll talk about one thing. Okay, so I don't know much about like Final Fantasy, but I do want to talk about a small thing that I really like, and this is actually from a D&D podcast that I've been listening to. And this is a One Piece D&D podcast, by the way. It's really good. I would recommend it. But I'll try and keep this very, very brief. But this is like a non-canon story, obviously, because it's D&D and stuff. But the characters, right? They're like basically a bunch of pirates, and across the campaign, they eventually end up going outside of space. Because in One Piece, there are actually other planets that are livable and stuff like that. And they actually go to one of the planets that is mysteriously named after one of the player characters. And his name is Duros. And he's basically the tank of the group. Like his whole shtick is that he protects people. He's like a tank. He has a shield and everything. He's a very like happy kind of guy. And so it's a very mysterious why this planet is named after him. And throughout the campaign, they try and figure out the whole thing, and they realize there's an emperor who rules over this entire planet, and he's basically immortal. He's been alive for 5,000 years. And, stuff happens, and then they finally, like, meet up with the emperor. And it's revealed that the emperor is basically the player character himself, but from a different timeline. Where he basically he wore a corrupted armor that basically, corrupted him and killed all of his party members, and then he basically became the ruler of this specific planet. Right?
Oh, wow.
And it's a pretty good twist. Maybe I spoiled it if you guys were already interested, but it's still good. What was it? Then, they fight through it, and it was a really good fight, like good twists in the story as well. But by the end, like Duros, as in like the player character of Duros, kills his villain version, defeats him, and in like the final last thoughts, like they destroy the armor, and the armor is what's been keeping him alive, and he basically loses his immortality and then starts growing old and old and old, and he basically returns to his normal self in those final moments, and he basically says like the villain version says to his normal player character self, like, did I hurt anyone? Is everyone else safe? And then like the player character says, of course, everyone is safe. He's like, that's fine. As long as I got to protect them, everything is all right. And that's like, then he dies. And I thought that was like the most like emotional moment. Even for a D&D story, this was like the most emotional moment because it's like, this guy was corrupted, but he was always a good guy that just got corrupted and killed all of his friends. Such a good villain. Like that was a really good like end off point for a simple villain. Like just someone who was really good or had good intentions, but went in a different direction than they really wanted to. It's like magical. But yeah, I just wanted to talk about that for sure.
That's really interesting. Because I see what you mean. That's like in terms of D&D, that's really profound. But also, I think what you mean is in like the he got taken to extremes. The same character, but he was taken to the extreme because of the experience he endured. But deep down, under everything, he's still the same character. I think, and then again, just how they portrayed down there seems really. I felt that I didn't check it at all. It's a really good way to end it.
It's really good. Just definitely recommend it. It's such a good and it's funny too. There's a lot of funny moments, but just wanted to talk about that. I don't know if that counts with D&D stuff, but yeah, pretty good.
Oh no, yeah, I can see a correlation like the obviously it's like the flip side. It's got like order and chaos, and that can depend on the character themselves and who they are. That can look different. You know what I mean? So this character wanted to defend everyone. I'm not sure how he was as a villain in the whole arc, but I wouldn't be surprised if there was some stuff he was doing in a villainous way that still retained to showing that he still had that mentality of protecting everyone, but taking it to the extreme. Because I think a villain is not necessarily a good and bad deeds. It's taking anything to the extreme. You can take protecting children to the extreme by giving them, depending on what they do, you can take that to the extreme where they're probably killing everyone else, killing other people just to save some kids or something. Things. So I think some like things taken to the extreme is another good way of showing like different sides of like something being good and something being bad. So yeah, I can see that being related. Sorry, I think you was gonna say something about henchmen as well, and like a henchman opposed to the villain. It was that we wanted to add into it as well.
But I wanted to do a final resume thing for the viewers.
Yeah, I'd say I think henchmen, where I can imagine it is like there's the main villain who has what their role or what the goal they have, and the henchman is kind of like they are the extension of that goal. Like they are, at least in story, like typical story of the hero journey, they are like they'll be the main villain, but then the guy you'll probably see more often before you fight the main villain, like for the final time or something like that, is like the henchman or the foot soldiers or something like that. So they are their power extended through them, sort of thing. I think typically.
Sometimes it's like that, yes. But well, first I wanted to do the final part of working on your villain. More or less what we talked about a bit. That this was always try to do a twisted way of the hero or something like that is good, but you can always go other ways around, just like happy chaos, and can end up working well. So depends a bit on how you execute it and understand how it can work better in your story. More or less for simplicity's sake.
Sorry, just because I'm not sure about, just to understand. Do you mean like how would that villains work in our story and henchmen's and that stuff? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Well, I was finishing the part of working on your villain. It's set in the list of topics I placed. The parts because it was easier to do it like that, or so I believe.
Okay.
So
talking about henchmen, one thing I want to add is that usually many writers I see them using crazy henchmen for no reason, or typically the typical henchman that usually is useless to add a weakness to the villain for no reason. And I always feel like people should work on efficient henchmen to make a semblance of realism, and then make the villain have their own mistakes.
Can I ask for a simple clarification before? Sorry, just a simple clarification.
Go ahead, please, shut me up.
Sorry. I'll let you speak after. I just want to know, but henchmen, right? Is that different from cannon fodder? Or no?
Yes.
No.
Okay.
No. There's a difference between the two. Henchman implies that these are the villains or antagonists' subordinates. Cannon fodder are usually just the nameless folks who get blown up in the middle of a battle. Hence, cannon fodder.
Right. So the henchmen still have like personality, and they can be just as intimidating, I guess, to the main characters of the story. Okay, gotcha.
Yes.
Just wanted to make sure.
But sometimes and there is a rather underrated story that makes the mooks their own henchmen also, which is nefarious. There's a game and there's the comic in the webpage. Also, it is in webtoons, which is one of the few gems that is in webtoons, in which you see the mooks also being their own person, while also you have your own henchmen.
Yeah, I think when I say about having the henchmen be an extension of the villain, it doesn't mean that they are literally a mirror of them. They can have their own like personality, their own quirks and stuff.
Correct.
But I imagine that if they're going to side with this bad guy, there are going to be some similarities. They agree with the goal, so at least the goal is going to be the same. How they go about it, okay, that can, the world's your oyster. How you deal with that, whether they agree with the methods overall, I like to say ultimately, probably the very least 70-30 agree on how he goes about it, disagree. Otherwise, I don't know. Is he really a henchman at that point? I guess. So they don't have to be exactly like a mirror of the villain. That would be boring. So yeah, but having their own. Yeah. So having their own flavor, I definitely just makes sense. I say it treat him like, I guess, when you talk about like different parties in a heroes team, everyone has different. They're all on the same goal, but they have different quirks and different things that they cover like their strengths and weaknesses. I would say the henchman is not. It's basically you kind of treat him
something similar. Something similar.
But just with a villainous twist, I suppose. That's kind of why I see it.
The way how I see henchmen, I kind of divide them kind of into like specific sections. Because of course, since I'm dealing with a war drama, naturally a dictator figure is going to have people who are going to be following them. However, not all of them are going to be 100% with the cause. So I will separate them into the true believers, the folks who are just there to survive, and the ones who just genuinely do not know what is going on above or on high. So the true believers are naturally the ones who will follow the villain all the way through. They 100% are committed to their ideology or whatever they're chasing. The ones who are just kind of there, they're following along with the villain, but not necessarily because they believe everything. It's because they genuinely do not see any other path forward. They don't have the faith in themselves to take the reins. It's mainly because they feel that they lack the charisma. They do not have the influence over the people. They just do what they can because they feel as though it is what's best for the people, and it will keep a state of order. It will keep the order, and it probably has the chance to get the least amount of people killed. And now here's the third one that I feel a lot of people kind of sleep on: the people who have no idea what the hell is going on. The unwitting collaborators. These are basically the guys who are on the ground, who are doing all the fighting. They're simply told one thing, but in reality it's another. But the truth of the matter is, they're just as guilty in the sense that they're committing these acts. They don't know everything, but they're still guilty of following through on what the antagonist wants them to do, or what the central villain wants them to do. They're still guilty in that sense. But the thing is, when it comes to like henchmen, there's different classes of them, like I've mentioned. And the way how these systems will end up working is very much dependent on where you draw the line on each of them, because that's when you get the scenes where someone in the upper management ends up betraying the villain. Now, whether or not this means that they become an ally to the protagonist, that is going to depend on the kind of person they are. Like, for example, you'll have Hux in the final Disney trilogy movie, where he says, "I don't care if we win or lose. I just want Kylo to lose." At this point, he simply wants to see the downfall of the villain. However, you can still have a betrayal in there, and have that person not necessarily join the protagonist, but they go off to start their own faction, because fundamentally they do not agree with anyone at that point. They don't agree with the protagonist's end goal, and they certainly do not agree with the villain's end goal. Did the villain become too soft? Have they diverged from the original contract? At that point, you really have to define what the henchmen at this point in time ends up doing, what they believe, and where does this fallout start, and where does it end.
Yeah, it's perfect, and there is a perfect case of it. That is the case of Sylvanas in WoW.
But
That
Sylvanas?
was the same.
In what? I'm not sure.
Yes, World of Warcraft.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, I think I know. Yeah, I know.
I did. Yeah, I haven't really followed World of Warcraft, but I understand. I know the game. I know of the game. So.
Yeah, I know. I've played Warcraft 3, so I do know roughly the story of Sylvanas. I know that, especially I think it was one of the related expansions kind of butchered her character a lot, but prior to that, she was like a big fan favorite. She is
Yes.
as a context
Yes,
who
it
don't
happened.
know her, so she was an elf who was killed by Arthas Mence, and then forced to become Banshee and essentially serve as an undead during him. But during that time, she essentially gained free will and at one point turned on Arthas. I forgot what she then tried to serve with the demons, the Dreadlords, and then ultimately betrayed them again. And
then she wants to do her own thing.
I forgot what the undead faction in Warcraft, World of Warcraft is, but she essentially formed that. And they were sort of sort of allied to the Horde, but she more or less did her own thing.
So she kind of sounded like she used to have a pretty complex character in her world.
Yeah, but yeah, I know her character was really butchered after Legion.
Oh boy.
Yeah, after Legion was butchered up so hard that even I felt bad about it.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, that's but yeah, I kind of want to sorry, I'll let you finish your topic because I've got my own stuff on Henchmen I want to talk about. But anyway, go on. You were talking about Sylvanas.
But well, Sylvanas was you heard what happened, but it became that she retained her own will and then said, "Oh crap, I am helping the one that is going against my own people," and said, "Fuck it, I'll ditch him and backstab and went to do her own thing, just from her own people." Also to kill Arthas. Vengeance is always served hot, and in this case, it was very hot.
Well, in Sylvanas' case, technically cold because she was technically dead.
I did something to bring that up.
Even though Arthas was literally frozen to the throne, so it'll have to be even colder than that.
Yeah.
Okay, stupid joke finished.
Either way, that's why I usually say that if you work on your own villain that isn't really insane or something like that, style Kefka in Final Fantasy V, I think it was on 6.
6.
Kefka
is 6.
Usually I mix both. Because I didn't play the 5. Again,
5 is an interesting subject, but that's for another day.
That's for another day. It's the only one I didn't play. But with 6, Kefka was insane, and literally he had hit the henchmen doing his own bidding, literally blindly. They were bloody blind.
They blindly followed him. Yeah. I know. I think I know the main cliff notes of 6. Unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but I kind of know most of the big moments.
Yeah.
From what I've seen, he's like the Joker in Final Fantasy.
Yeah, he's
I wouldn't.
I actually don't know.
No. I wouldn't call him that. We should probably get to the next topic in a minute before. But we'll let everyone have a closing statement. But I just want to kind of put it out there that I wouldn't really consider Kefka a Joker figure per se. The thing is, the way how the Joker in Batman works as a villain is mainly this notion of the rules of society are fundamentally a joke to him. So what he ends up doing is he tries to push everyone over the edge to do the worst, to become the worst version of themselves. Kafka, on the other hand, does not see the purpose of life and creation as a whole, because he's never really gotten the idea of how any of that works. The Joker fundamentally, the Joker fundamentally gets this idea of the sanctity of life. This is why he thinks it's funny. Kafka, on the other hand, does not understand the concept, period, so he feels, what is the point of us building something if it is eventually going to decay and die? So at that point, you have a very nihilistic person who just finds the comedy in just the futility of humans and their own humanity's laws. Exactly, of humanity's laws. Whereas Kafka sees the futility of life, and whether he admits it or not, it scares him. That terrifies him. So when the party actually confronts him on finding their meaning, he snaps. He actually snaps during the final battle. He tells you outright that you all sound like lines from a self-help book. And he's not wrong about that. He's very right. But the problem is he cannot comprehend this notion of finding something to hold on to, something to make life worth living. So when you have a villain that is confronted with a philosophy that completely destroys their own grasp on reality, you have a recipe for a fantastic confrontation between your heroes and your villains any day of the week. It's awesome stuff.
Yeah, the indomitable human spirit. It's my favorite.
Versus someone who has ultimately lost faith in the human spirits.
Yeah, exactly. I do want to. We were still talking about henchmen a bit before, right?
Right.
Okay, I want to. This is a side topic, or what did you want to say? Tips for.
I was just having.
Yeah. A side topic regarding henchmen is I find it very interesting when stories do make the henchmen themselves turn into like the next big villain. Like when they were a side character and then suddenly they become like one of the main threats.
I've actually have plans to do that, like particularly with one particular character in Goddesses Chosen is essentially going to be, who's essentially a side character so far, is essentially going to be the final antagonist for my hero, Alyssa.
Oh boy,
that would be good. Actually, I think that would be. Yeah. I love when stories do that, and I can bring up two. I can bring up two examples right now, and one of them you guys already know. But I honestly think this would count an example. Obito, who starts off as Toby in Naruto, right?
Yeah.
And in the beginning, he's literally comedy character, and then suddenly he becomes like one of the biggest villains in the entire story, which I think is such a good henchman. Transition. You know?
Yeah, that was a nice twist when that came out.
He started off as a henchman, like nobody, and also kind of like a joke character, and then turns into one of the biggest villains in the story, which I love when stories do that, and I think it's maybe underutilized in some stories. Could be utilized more often, maybe.
I can't think of many top head.
Then there's another example, but this one is more like it's from the perspective of the henchmen themselves, and it's from a manga called Sentai Daishoku, or Go Go Loser Rangers. Maybe you've heard of this.
Sick. Yep, I sure have, my friend.
You've heard of that one, right?
Mm-hmm. I have plans.
You haven't read it then, or
not yet, but sooner or later.
I really like. Basically, we follow. It's a parody of, or it's based off of Power Rangers, right?
Or Super Sentai.
Oh yeah, exactly. Super Sentai. That's why it's called Sentai Daishoku in like Japanese. But basically, any of the Sentai shows, Power Ranger stuff, and it follows like basically the Rangers, won, and the villains basically are kept as slaves that are meant to entertain the public, and they're basically like they're just slaves. And the thing is, the villains are immortal, but they're weak, and basically you follow like the main character who's like the henchman of the villains, and he's like basically the weakest like person in the entire story in the beginning, but he has the special ability of being able to disguise himself as any person that he sees, and he basically uses that to try and infiltrate the Power Ranger like building and try and work his way up towards trying to assassinate and kill every single one of the Power Rangers, the top 5. and it's so interesting because I love the progression of the main character. Where he, in the beginning, it's more like he's just trying to avenge his villainous masters. In the beginning, he because all the masters have been killed or they've been become slave, and they're like can't do anything. So he's trying to, get revenge for them and try and get justice to his own team. And he's just it's sort of like his motivations are very similar to like just a henchman or like a side character, Yeah. But then over time, as he progresses through the story, it more becomes that he wants everything for himself. And he basically he starts to gain the villainous traits himself instead. So it's like so interesting seeing him start off as like just a weak henchman, like a minion to the villains, to him working his way up to becoming the villain, big bad villain himself. I love that. It's so great, the progression that it goes through. I would highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's it. That sounds really intriguing. I don't know. For me, it feels like they say someone's about to start a villain arc. It just feels like it's been put into made a whole story.
Yeah.
Nah, it's really good.
It's really good.
I'd say so. All right. So there's quite a few topics that are here. Before I want to suggest one that we do, but are there any other statements that we'd like to make on this one before we close it off?
I've got nothing left to say.
I think
I thought this would be 1 hour and a half long. I guess we're just keeping it to 1 hour.
As long as an hour.
Yeah, because I could continue, but probably I would spoil several things of RLP without willing. Just showing it. Because in my case, it would be entirely the opposite side. It's like it started far earlier than with Jujutsu Kaisen or with Happy Chaos. But I had this idea of always trying to do the flip side. The hero is the bad guy, and the villain is a good guy.
Oh.
Well, in this case,
I think sometimes
you should definitely check out that one that I just recommended, Loser Ranger. You gotta check that out because that's actually a pretty good reference. Because in that case, the hero is the bad guy and the villain is the good guy.
Yeah, but I decided to work it more forward to making the villain a real villain himself, while the hero is more of a clueless hero, to which I jabbed the cliches of the isekai, because since it's isekai, and usually my style of writing is shoving a few jabs every now and then of the genre. So usually I add the typical harem part to laugh at it.
Sorry.
Then, but also I am making the hero his own persona at the same time, and I am planning to do something again what happened with Kefka, but on the other side, with the villain being the one flipping off everything.
Okay. I think for now, that's good. No, should we move on to the next topic?
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the next topic because I'm in no plan to wrap up anytime soon.
I'm down to go. I'm down to go for like another hour or an hour or a half hour.
In my case, I am limited by battery, but well.
Oh, okay.
No problem.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
I kind of want to take on one from Eternal Dawning. Of course, there's another one from Water Dark that I'm also quite fond of too. So
which one?
Yeah, that's some really good ones there. I was thinking trying to do them when they're here, but if they don't mind us,
I think I'm leaning towards anti-heroes versus anti-villains. That is actually a very interesting topic.
Yeah,
for
sure.
And we can do one from Dawning for the time being, and we can probably talk about why fanfics are popular among women if you'd like to, anyway.
I probably wouldn't have much to say on that.
Yeah, same. I don't know what I would say.
I do have like a pathological.
I've got a bit. I guess I could say.
I could say, yeah. There's something I can say on it myself. It's more like I'm kind of just trying to fish out what you guys would be more comfortable with talking about for now. I think the villain conversation that we just had with Beat is the perfect transition for anti-heroes and anti-villains.
Exactly. That would agree with. I would agree with that.
Okay. Well, yeah, true. Okay, yeah, we'll do anti-hero and the villains, and then we have actually, and everyone's still willing to. We can go for like the fanfics one. But I've got a little bit to say to that, to be fair. Yeah, we'll do anti-heroes and anti-villains. Who wants to start?
Maybe because I have only 1%, so I am going to just.
Oh no, he's gonna bow out.
Anyway, thanks.
All right.
Yeah, it's been good hearing from you, Beat. Honestly.
Yeah, see ya.
Good to have you.
Great. Yeah, it's great to have you.
Yeah, a really good topic. We had
great topic.
Yeah, it was really deep. Yeah, we had a lot to talk about in that one.
Yeah, like you definitely paved the way because, like, I was thinking about doing the anti-heroes and anti-villains from the start myself when I first saw it, but you actually paved the way for a very good topic on this. So I do hope you can you'll listen to it. Well, I'll be sure to reference you.
Yeah, very comfortable segue for this one.
Do you not have a charger nearby? He's gone. He did say 1%.
Yeah.
He said 1%, so I guess, but I'm kind of confused on if he had a charger, he could have continued.
No, he's here.
He might be here. Cool.
Just here.
Alright, so anti-heroes, anti-villains. I guess sound like you got some stuff to say about that.
In my case, I don't really work hard on anti-heroes because I always found them a bit too in the middle of everything at the same time, and ends up being really a muddy place. The same with anti-villains. But literally the difference it would be the amount of muddy you have, because anti-heroes kill for a good reason. So we could jump into the heroes of the past, like, I don't know, the Hercules and the like, to more or less compare a bit between some anti-heroes and a hero of ancient Greece, for example.
What was Hercules? Oh, you probably talking like the classical Hercules? Like
it'd be the classical Hercules, the one who killed his wife and children and were forced to do the seven tasks. The 7 tasks.
Well, that's dark.
I don't know.
Yeah. Like trust me, Greek mythology is like the Iliad is can be properly messed up.
Well, it's usual with Greek mythology. Literally, usually it all starts with Zeus fucking up. Literally.
Oh, so usually begins with
Zeus.
something really stupid happening, then they kind of have to like redeem themselves. If that kind of.
I will say, like, starting with Greece gives me a perfect example of an anti-hero.
That's what I was planning already.
If you're okay for me speaking, I can let you. I'll let you finish.
No, that's what I was planning to get someone to remember certain anti-heroes.
Yeah. So this. Okay, this is actually from God of War, and I'm going to be very specific when I say that. When I say God of War, I mean the PS2 and the PS3 games.
Oh yeah.
Not the recent ones. So for those of you sort of unfamiliar with the current God of War, but not what it was in the past. It was this sort of Devil May Cry clone that was developed by Santa Monica, exclusively released on the PlayStation 2. And they were like some of its best games. It features essentially, and these were like properly brutal games. A lot of nudity, actual sex.
Yeah.
But it's sort of done away to the side, but you just have to do the button probs. I won't get into that. But essentially, the story follows Kratos, a Spartan who a fairly merciless king, and through one battle swore his soul to Ares so he could win the battle. As which he became Ares' slave, and he was forced to basically relish in bloodshed. And at one point, ended up killing his own wife and child. Come with grief, and as a final sort of punishment by Ares, the ashes of his wife and child were burned into his flesh, so he will forever be haunted by it. The first game is essentially him working for essentially Athena to deal with Ares, who was going on a rampage in Athens. And he's not like essentially a hero or anything. He doesn't just kill like the sort of minions of Ares. He brutally murders even the people of Athens, and the final battle essentially destroys Athens. And he doesn't show any sympathy at all. He's literally this raging Spartan who will literally rip apart everyone. The second game is where he replaces Ares as the god of war, and is then betrayed by Zeus in Rhodes. Instead of dying, he was then essentially saved by the imprisoned Titan Gaia, to basically weave back fate in order to kill Zeus, which would then lead on to the third game. And in that game, Kratos, like basically not through like doing anything doing this for the good of mankind. He's literally there just to kill all the Olympian gods. Everyone he kills, he literally destroys the world. First boss you fight, Poseidon. Upon his death, a tsunami destroys most of the world. You kill Helios, the sun goes out. You kill Hades, the dead burst from the ground and then start slaughtering the living. You kill Hera, and all the plants die. And essentially, by the time you reach the final confrontation with Zeus, you've essentially destroyed the entire world. And still, Kratos shows no genuine sympathy for everyone. All he wants is to just destroy Zeus. So I think that's like, because I think like the discussion of like anti-heroes is definitely, use of anti-heroes definitely is sort of mixed. I say an anti-hero is sort of essentially playing as an actual villain. And I think Kratos in those games is particularly a good example. Because like, you're not doing anything good. You are literally destroying the world.
I think Kratos is a very extreme example, but he does count as an anti-hero, though. He does count. But I should mention,
he's definitely of the extreme version.
Definitely.
These games were like
They're not solved.
exactly
Not solved.
narrative masterpieces. Like these were like Devil May Cry levels of stupid.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to the subject of anti-heroes in general, I think we kind of have a bit of a binary way of looking at them. Like, for example, some people would tell me that Wolverine from the X-Men would be considered an anti-hero, and I'm kind of the belief that not necessarily. I don't really think when a character becomes brutal or shows off human flaws like this, I don't really think it's wise to call them anti-heroes by themselves, because the problem is when we have that level of a criteria, literally anyone and everything can be called an anti-hero. Like, for example, some say Shadow the Hedgehog is an anti-hero. I don't agree with that personally. I don't. The thing with him is that he's edgy. And I don't think edge by itself constitutes an anti-hero.
Like that. Like one of my favorite games was like Urge of Cerberus.
Exactly.
Was edgy. He is not a villain. He's not an anti-hero. He's edgy.
Exactly.
He's definitely the hero.
Exactly. So like, I feel the best example of an anti-hero, and we're gonna get to the anti-villain side of things in a minute, but I consider a certain Captain Jack Sparrow an anti-hero.
Yeah.
I bet you guys are probably aware of why I say this. But for those who haven't really caught on, when you really think about it, a lot of what you expect a hero to be in the literary sense is simply to be the main character of their story. In a literary sense, that's what a hero is supposed to be. A hero doesn't necessarily need to conform to the dogma of being a superhero or just the kind of person who quote unquote saves everyone. A hero in a literary sense is just the lead character in a story. So where does the anti-hero come in? They simply don't conform to what we expect from a hero. This is where Jack Sparrow comes in. When you really think about it, Jack is really getting a lot of people screwed over and hurt just for his own ends. He doesn't join Will Turner for the sake of charity. He joins Will because Will will make his journey easier. Will has a connection to Barbossa through his father. And not only that, Barbossa has a connection to the Black Pearl because the Black Pearl just so happens to be Jack's ship. Jack Sparrow accepts the call of adventure not to make the world a better place. It's to get his ship back, and he does everything he can to get it back. He'll get William Turner screwed over. He will get the Navy screwed over. He will get his own personal allies in trouble if it gets him closer to his goal. What I'm getting at is this is a character that embellishes things. He's a coward. He doesn't face his enemies directly. He will manipulate them. He'll steer you in a circle, all in the name of his own betterment. In that sense, can you really call Captain Jack Sparrow a hero when even his own allies are aware that he's going to betray them at some point in time? In the third movie, they lock him up knowing full well that he's probably going to get them screwed over at some point. Now, technically speaking, he doesn't do that in the third, but he has a reputation for this thing. He's had 2 full movies of getting everyone around him into trouble. So in that sense, and remember, even though you could make a debate or make a point that Will is technically speaking the true hero of the first movie, the movie is really all about Jack and what he ends up doing and what he ends up winning in the end. And if you remember, Norrington's final quote in the movie is, "We're just going to give him a head start." Reason? Because incidentally, Jack somehow managed to help these people in the middle of his own selfish pursuits. So he does save the day, but it wasn't out of any altruistic
reasons. Yeah. It's kind of for his own reasons.
Yeah. Also didn't help that all their ships were moored and his ship was already at full sail and was the fastest ship in the Caribbean.
Exactly.
It's not like they could have, even if they tried to pursue him, it's not like they could have captured it.
That's the other
They just said it to save face sort of thing.
Sparrow. I love Captain Jack Sparrow in those films, and particularly third one, especially because there's his cat and mouse with particularly Beckett. So Beckett's sort of the most underrated villain I think of cinema, because this guy literally steals the show whenever he's on. And there's a specific deleted scene from the film that really adds to sort of his rivalry with Jack. But it's sort of in the case that the two of them never really, even though you see them strike a deal, they never really trust each other. And it's something that Jack brings up in that deleted scene. You be me, you know that there's mutual distrust between the two of us. So he proposes one that would at least keep themselves at arm's length. But the two of them always just thinking, what is the other going to do? And that sort of makes him winning over Beckett and Beckett's reaction makes sort of sense, because he sort of, it's then he realized, I've lost. He got me. Because he is the one person who never underestimated Jack Sparrow and then had to accept he walked straight into his trap. And that was a trap that literally ended up with part of Will, involved Sparrow literally luring the entire British, the Royal Navy to the pirates, which essentially screwed and had convinced all the pirates to go out and fight them.
Because
he's looking out for himself, because he wants to save himself.
Because like that's the thing about an anti-hero that I feel that kind of gets a little bit lost in the weeds. Because the edginess is not an inherent feature. It really isn't. It really depends on the person. Hell, you could argue that the main character from the Lego movie is also an anti-hero because he's genuinely incompetent. He doesn't do much to help people. Hell, he doesn't even know what's going on half the time. He's just getting strung along into something that's much bigger than he is. The difference between him and Jack, though, is that Jack seems to have more agency in everything he does. So it's like we know Jack is not the best person. Hell, we probably even want to have a drink with the man with how much trouble he causes. But we enjoy watching him anyway because we know what his motivations are. We know what his goals are. He doesn't choose the most scrupulous means of doing it. But at the same time, though, another thing that comes up for me is that a hero doesn't necessarily have to have a defined list of scruples either, though. Because, like I said earlier, the hero in the literary sense just happens to be someone that we're following. The anti-hero definition really just comes from the fact that they seem to do everything in contrast to what we normally expect. And I feel the killing and the brutal aspect tends to get overblown in comparison because I did see a case that someone tried to make the other day that the Punisher himself is not necessarily an anti-hero. I kind of have a harder time buying that one, and I'm sure most of everyone here would agree on that.
I'm not that familiar with the Punisher, but I have an idea who he is.
Yeah. Like, so just to keep it general so we can all follow, when you hear that someone is brutal and has a habit of killing their enemies, do you automatically make the moniker that they are anti-heroes, like right off the bat?
Oh, really? Like, I literally have some of my own some of the party I write have a generally high body count. I wouldn't really call them anti-heroes.
Exactly.
They just have like a grey moral compass.
I think it also depends. I think it depends on the setting as well, because Punisher is basically it's real life, right? And in our current society, morals are that criminals should be judicially punished, but not killed. Or every criminal has a chance. I don't know, at retribution, or I don't know what it is, but like they have to first be judged before like killing and stuff. And that's like in our society, and I assume in James' world, right? It's a fantasy world, and morals like that can't be that applicable there. It's more about kill or be killed.
Yeah. I'll accept that.
Yeah, in terms of the setting and stuff. Yeah. I think also, like I said, it's kind of depends on like the rules that the characters live in, and also like I said, perspective. I think perspective is the biggest one. Perspective of who you're following and the rules of the world they're in. Because you can have some of these rules we have here put into another place, and it'll change the paradigm of how you see things.
Because like we wouldn't consider Goku and company anti-heroes just because they kill off a villain or two, and most don't consider the heroes of Grief Myth to be anti-heroes either. Of course, you could make a case for Hercules being an anti-hero if you really tried, but I don't really think it would be valid in that case.
I wouldn't really call them like anti-heroes.
Right. So I think when we are getting down to the question of how do we define the difference between an anti-hero and anti-villain, we need to understand what a hero and a villain are fundamentally in a literary sense. Maybe not necessarily in that highbrow overthinking way, but if we can at least determine what our definitions are, figuring out what the the difference between them starts to become a little bit more obvious. So if I had to define what an anti-hero is, it really is just another hero of the story. They just happen to employ means or behave in a manner that is antithetical to most heroes. They don't have to conform to superhero dogma. They're just the main characters, but they don't follow the traditional sense of how a hero is meant to behave. Instead of running headlong into adventure, they run away from it, basically.
Yeah. So I think, like you said, they go against the rules of the place the world they're in, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So they do their own thing. They have their own sort of code, and it goes against maybe what the societal agreement of in that world is. So I think that's like one of the main things.
Yeah, I think that's like the defining trait of like anti-heroes. Essentially, it's them it's them literally against the world.
Exactly.
It does make
It's
me
like
wonder. Sorry. Go on.
at least like most cases, essentially them against like the establishment.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's probably okay. Sorry, I've lost my point. I think they were just finding nonsense.
Ah, my bad. No. It does make me wonder though, because I believe it's like I said, it's a mix of the societal them disagreeing with the society they're in, but also I think it also depends on what what culture or what area you read a certain story in. Because I think going back to like Greek stories, I'm not sure they had like the whole anti-hero and that stuff, but I would you say they'll see them? Would you say they'll see them more as anti-heroes or more as heroes in their own story?
Not yeah, no, yeah, yeah. I'll just say like I'm definitely like this bit of a historian. I will admit I'm not that well versed in Greek mythology. I do know some of the histories of ancient Greece, and particularly because what you got to remember is like Greece wasn't a nation; it was like city-states. So stuff like Athens, Sparta, Argos, Corinth, and they all had their sort of like their own rules and their own cultures. So you can't. So in terms of like the Iliad, it's hard to sort of say like someone's an anti-hero because they could be from like a different city-state where their entire culture is completely different from someone like Athens. Or even like someone from Ionia, where they're from across the Aegean Sea. And that is like and like to a lot of people in say like Archaea or Aetolia, Ionia is literally a different world to them. It's essentially what the Trojan War is in the Iliad.
It could come down to a difference in culture on top of that as well, because like what you might see as like questionable or wily traits in a protagonist could simply just be a result of the wit and guile that's acknowledged as heroic in that side of the world at that point in time. So that is something to think about. But I think what might be even easier to nail down is probably what we consider an anti-villain. That might be a little bit easier to nail down depending on who you ask. So like if I had to kind of sum up what I think an anti-villain is, and a lot of folks kind of run into this kind of problem where it's like, how do we define the difference between an anti-hero and an anti-villain? Because you start to feel that they're almost the same thing, right? Well, the way how I normally sum it up, it turns into, regardless of how much good an anti-villain tries to do, at the end of the day, what they are chasing is still fundamentally bad for everybody else involved. What the hero is trying to do is something that they feel is fundamentally good for them or pretty much everyone else. The anti-villain, whether they admit it or not, they're going headlong into something that's either going to hurt everyone or benefit themselves and only themselves. So even if you have an anti-villain who wants to save this orphanage, if saving the orphanage results in you killing as many people who have nothing to do with with the suffering of these children, you're still technically a villain. You're still hurting other people. You're still making their lives miserable on the account of you trying to make the lives of others better. Now, granted, an anti-hero can also run into this dilemma, but the thing is, fundamentally speaking, the anti-hero is supposed to stay within some degree of a moral level or maybe a moral scruple. However, this also means that the anti-villain can also have their own set of morals as well. Like, they may not take a life, they may not necessarily believe in torture, but what is their end goal still going to entail? Are they still going to blow somewhere up where there are a lot of innocent people living? Are they still going to end up kidnapping someone, but they may not necessarily torture them? Like, you're doing some really questionable stuff in pursuit of your goals. So, I think the easiest way to do this would be, for the anti-hero, what is their end goal? Is it still to benefit someone, or is it to benefit someone else, or is it to make life easier for other people? For the villain, is it to better someone else at the expense of others? it might sound that these are a lot more intertwined than they actually are. It sounds like it, but there's a lot of nuances depending on the character you're talking about.
Can I
Like-
ask a quick question?
Go ahead.
Sorry. I just want to ask, but have you ever watched Classroom of the Elite? This is related to the anti-villain thing.
Oh, go for it. I know of it too.
I know of it, but
So no one here has watched it, or?
Not yet.
I got some cliff notes of it, but I can't remember as well.
Oh man, because this would be so relevant with anti-villain for sure. And I would recommend the anime or light novel, whichever you guys prefer. But I would for sure say, and this is because the thing is, personally, I feel like it's very hard to come up with examples of anti-villains personally. Like, but on the top of my mind,
I have one myself, but let me just wait for you before I bring him up.
Yeah. Well, on the top of my mind, then I would bring up basically, literally, the main character of Classroom of the Elite, which I would say is actually anti-villain for sure. Well, maybe why do I bring this up and then these you guys haven't seen the show and then it's like, oh man.
From what little I heard about it, I can see it on a Beats.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, I would say the main character Iono Koji. Oh, have you seen it, Lester? James.
No, I've seen clips.
Oh,
that's
okay.
pretty much all I'm gonna watch of it because I don't think I could stomach that crap.
It's really good. Okay, it's fine. Okay, you can watch clips of it. It's fine. Or you can read the light novel, which might be a better experience, in my opinion, because people have said the light novel is much better. You get to hear inner dialogue and everything, blah blah blah. But I do love the anime, and I love the main character for sure. He's probably like the best part of it. But yeah, I would literally describe the main character as probably an anti-villain, as it describes literally what you just said, where he does everything that may seem good. He seems like a good guy, and he basically gains everyone's like trust and admiration for him. But like basically in the end, at least in the first season, it's like you finally hear his inner monologue. You never hear what he thinks or what he sees or what he sees in other people. But the first time in like the first season, in the first season, you hear his inner monologue, and he's like, I'm just doing this all for me. You all are tools.
Exactly.
I don't care what I have to do, as long as I achieve my goals. It's like that. And it's so well done. It's so well written. I love it. Personally, I would really recommend it. But
I heard really good things. I've heard really good things.
It's definitely not my sort of thing.
I think I understand why on the surface it's like a typical I don't know, light novel anime, how the style of it. But from what I heard, writing wise, I've heard it's really good.
I do have two examples, and they're probably going to be the most cliche depending on who you ask. I apologize in advance. So the most obvious anti-villain is definitely going to be Thanos of the MCU. And before everyone throws their arms up, I totally understand. I am totally burned out of all this nonsense myself. However, since I am a bit of a pragmatist, I have to acknowledge when things kind of line up with reality rather than what I personally like. So Thanos himself works as an anti-villain in the sense that what he is doing is still going to fundamentally screw everyone. It's going to get a lot of people killed. But he has found this fundamental reality that the universe itself is out of balance. And no one really has a solution for it that makes any sense to him. So the solution he has is to put it in balance by killing an equal amount of people and leaving an equal amount of people alive, so that the resources of the world or the universe do not run out or deplete. It's madness. It's cruel. But does it make sense? Yes, it does. Does this sound like that it would be better for the world in the long run? Technically, yes. But the problem is the pain that it leaves in its wake. So what is interesting is that Thanos himself ends up winning. He does end up winning within Infinity War. He does win. He gets to see the results of his labor. He's eventually killed, but it doesn't matter. He's already won. The world that he wanted to create, he ended up creating it. Now, does this mean that Cap and everyone else are the bad guys for taking him down? Not necessarily, because Thanos is still playing the role of the villain, but he's just fundamentally and diametrically opposed to what we expect from most villains, because this goal is not necessarily for his sake. This is for the universe's sake. This is what makes him an anti-villain. That one stipulation is what separates him from it. My other example is going to be Light Yagami of Death Note. Now, some define him as an anti-hero, but I feel he is more of an anti-villain more than anything else. He sees the corruption of the human spirit, and he believes it is his role to play judge, jury, and executioner so the world steers towards a better future. But the problem with that is it really wise to give that level of power to someone like Light? And this series asks this question several times over, and at the end of the story, Light goes out the villain. He's not the hero. Throughout the entire saga, the story tries to make it clear that this is not your friend. This is not your hero. And if you didn't already catch that, the way how he dies tells you everything you need to know. You know, like how heroes tend to go down in a blaze of glory? There's always emotion, there's tears, there's all of that. Light goes down screaming in the manga. He is begging not to die. He is begging not to lose his life because he knows there's so much more he could be doing. He's not framed as a hero in the final arc, nor is he ever framed a hero either. This is a man who genuinely believes he's doing good, but he doesn't realize that he is just as corrupt, if not more, than the people he's going after. So if there is going to be a statement on the difference between the anti-villain and the anti-hero, it really comes down to who's getting hurt, who's benefiting, and how are they doing it. That's where you're going to find your defining line between the two definitions or the two extremes.
Yeah, because they do on paper, when you especially look at it from the surface level, they do kind of cross if you just kind of like look at it from surface level. But one thing I was thinking, which I think might help differentiate them, is the starting point of each of them. Like I think an anti-hero will start with your perspective. Oh, this guy's a selfish git, and maybe he is. But then the thing he does, whether accident or by purpose, semi by purpose or whatever, end up helping people. So that makes him an anti-hero. And an anti-villain, they'll start on one. Okay, they probably start as a villain, but then it's just your perspective of them shifts a bit. Even though you probably still put him in the camp of a villain, for example, Thanos, it's like, oh, okay, he's not just a maniacal laughing villain. He has this point, and it makes sense. But nah, you're still evil. So I think it's where they begin, where they go as the story continues, that makes the difference.
Exactly. I thought about this more when I kind of had to ask myself the question of, are the characters I'm writing purely what you'd probably consider a hero or a villain? I started to really question that, because I've been writing my antagonist as a bit of a hero, not necessarily in her own story, but if this book had any other saga, this character would actually have been the hero. No joke. This character could very well have been the hero with what they're trying to do. The problem, though, and this is something that I feel like even people who kind of believe that their character is always morally justified, they're kind of failing to see what makes this character dangerous if they get their way. Yes, we're going to beat all the bad guys. Absolutely, we're going to take the bad guys down, and we're going to replace it with a perfect world order. Everything's going to be okay. Here's the problem: world order. That's the problem. You
basically doing the same thing. Yeah, you're basically, by taking down a tyrant, you're basically becoming you usurping them and replacing them with yourself. Basically doing the same thing they did, if not worse.
And most people don't catch on that even when they're writing the most honest of heroes. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we should always be skeptical of every person with good intentions. But what I am saying is you have to read in between the lines of what a character is going after, because this is something that we even see in Dune. Like, Paul becomes basically the messiah of the Fremen. And this sounds pretty uplifting, but here's the problem with that. Paul knows that people are going to start killing in his name. He is going to become the center of a new cultish religion that gets millions of people killed. And you didn't really think about that too much in the original Dune, despite the fact that it does come up. But now we have to contend with the fact that for as good as a hero is, their heroism is only in the moment. What happens after the heroing is already done? What happens when there's no more villains to fight?
Yeah.
Or rather, what happens when the hero becomes the villain? Like, what happens there?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope. And
Exactly.
I think also I think you even look at it from another perspective. Like, like if because you're following the main character, you're kind of stuck in his perspective.
Exactly.
So if you're not thinking back and taking 2 seconds to take a step back, you'll be kind of in on he's doing the hero stuff. But then if you was to look at it from like the other side, you kind of realize, like, just maybe the people, no, some people, fair enough. But maybe look at the regular person there.
Exactly.
There's this force, an attacker coming to destroy my status quo. As far as I'm concerned, they're the villain. So it's a matter of perspective as well on how it can be done. But there's levels to that. But
It's like, I mean, and it's like you said, because you have to think about it from the perspective of the people who are also on the receiving end. Like, it's not a matter of history is written by the victors. This is more of a matter of this character believes in this reality, that this world would be better off if we went down in this path. All right, but what's going to happen after that? How many corpses is this character going to have to casually walk over to get to that goal? And especially, how many of those corpses are going to be those of people who wanted nothing to do with this nonsense? Like, at that point, of course, someone is going to mention, well, does the hero become an anti-hero at that point? Here's the best part. Are you ready for this? And this is probably going to floor you. No. They don't become an anti-hero at that point. They're still the hero of the story in the literary sense. Their actions are what's pushing the story forward. Now, of course, you could say, well, that's the protagonist. Yes, but the protagonist is still a hero in this context. They're still going towards a goal. Their actions determine the course of the story. So even if they end up killing people who had nothing to do with the situation, we don't automatically call them anti-heroes. We just simply say they made a mistake. There we go.
I wouldn't make difference of that. It's just what they do after they realize the mistakes they made. Are they remorseful? Do they just shrug their shoulders and say, "Well, that's necessary"? That's when I think that line draws.
That is when the line gets crossed. Like the moment that I think is inherent to this conversation is, where does the line get crossed here, and who defines the line, and what does the character do when they know they've crossed the line? Do they justify it as it was necessary, or do they show one thing when they speak with others? What are they like behind closed doors? They may tell someone that it was justified in front of them to keep things going, but if they're behind closed doors and they're absolutely shattered, then you don't necessarily have a binary conversation. You now have a conversation that's going all over the place. You now have a character that is not only layered, but you now have a conversation starter. Now you have a debatable topic. This character knows what they're doing is wrong, and they're completely destroyed about it. They don't know what else to do here. The whole world is crumbling around them, and they have no notion of what to do in this context. But yet, they're doing what they can because they feel it's the right course of action. But now here's another problem, and I just opened it up. This is how a villain thinks, too. This is how a villain thinks. A villain can still be broken up, and they can still hate what they're doing, but they're still being the villain. They're not changing.
No, that's true. That is true. Yeah. I guess, again, I think then at the end of it just comes down to the ultimate goal. What would that ultimately do for everyone in the end when it's realized?
Exactly.
And I think just how they handle it. Yeah, but yeah, the line gets really thin when you start messing around with it, innit? It's quite interesting.
Like, do you see why this topic is so much fun? Because
Yeah.
it's like, if you limit your understanding to the anti-hero to just the edgy killer, or just the anti-villain as just the person who's trying to do too much good, you don't really see just how nuanced you can get your characters at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Because these archetypes are a lot more intriguing than most people realize. And it's why I feel like when we throw the term anti-hero and anti-villain around, or all of that, we throw it around a little too casually, and then we realize, no, this subject is a lot more layered than we give it credit for. Like, Shadow the Hedgehog is not what I would consider an anti-hero. Does he kill people in his games? Yes, he does. But you know who also kills? But you know who else kills people? Fucking Goku kills people. Pardon my French. Goku kills people, man. Vegeta kills people, but we still consider them heroes. Hell, you can make a case for Vegeta being an anti-hero if you really wanted to, but that went out the wayside when the Buu saga started.
Well, yeah. It's a matter of perspective, and also now you bring that up. It's another good thing too. It's a matter of the world you're in and what you've been compared to. Especially, so I think it's best to be fair. You compare them in the world. Like you said, Vegeta could be considered an anti-hero, but then the next villain comes out and they're just killing people, turning them to candy, and just total genocide. You're like, okay, you are the extreme in this world.
Exactly.
So then where does it put you? It changes the paradigm right there. Yeah.
The paradigm completely shifts. This is I think someone mentioned this earlier, but a lot of this really depends on what this world looks like, and what the parallel and where these paradigm shifts come in. Just depends on who's doing what is the reason for it, and what is happening in comparison to the motivations of another character, because that really changes a conversation. Now, fundamentally, you can still have someone who's still very, very cruel. You can still have that. But because of the actions of the worst people, somehow the window of the conversation shifts in a completely different direction, to the point where the ceiling for terrible behavior is so far off that we have something worse. Now we have to contend with a different understanding of what is actually happening in front of us.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect. I give it a perfect example. I'm gonna be mixed two stories together just to get a funny example. So if you get Ned Stark, and put him to the Lord of the Rings, he's gonna he's one of the best guys. He's one of the most good characters in Game of Thrones. Though that exactly. But then you put him into Lord of the Rings, he's gonna look pretty dubious. I can't lie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's the scary thing, huh?
Yeah, it's really crazy.
Really makes you think. Like, Ned Stark is a paragon of goodwill in the world of Ice and Fire. But if you put someone of his nature, someone who has at least some notion of how political games work, all of a sudden Ned Stark looks like the villain, or at least very adjacent to one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's interesting, man.
Of course, that's not to say that the world of Tolkien does not have nuance. It does. It's just that if you put someone like Ned Stark in there, when you have Frodo, you have Saruman, and everyone else, all of a sudden, I can see Eddard sitting in the same room as Saruman in some shape or form.
Yeah, I can see all. You know what? This guy has a point. I don't know. I can just see something, and he's meant to be the paragon of good in the story he's in. I mean, that's what's really great. That's what's funny about it. It's just yeah, I can see it. That's the craziest part. No, actually, no. Should I talk this one particular example even funnier? It's the guy. What's his name? Sean something Bean, right? The actor.
Oh, yeah.
He played
Sean Bean.
Sean Bean. He played the guy. Yeah, he made guys trying to get after the ring. Or he turned good after.
Boromir.
Redeemed himself. Yeah, so that's funny. I don't know. In my head, that just has that. That would be some funny.
It just because that parallel was even funnier to me because I know Sean Bean plays a character in the movie. So this example is even funnier when you know what happened to that character when he fell under the temptation of the ring. It just kind of makes our point all the more salient.
That just hit me down. Like, oh yeah, that's a double one actually. Yeah.
God damn, I was not. I did not have that on my bingo card today, man.
But I would say just a small thing. But Boromir, I really liked him as a character. Like, if you think about it, he was corrupted by the ring, but honestly, he was such a good guy. Deep down, he was always a good guy.
I feel like everyone there, he was like the most human. Like I would, like, actually no, don't get me wrong, all of them are human, but I think just the fact that he went through a whole arc of he was tempted, but then he redeemed himself.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
He showed he was say it felt like he was more flawed than the others, but despite that, he still came back around.
Yeah, you see, that's the really interesting aspect of it, because like the ring's corruption hurts all the more when the person it corrupts is a genuinely good person.
Good guy, yeah.
Like this is something like I'm gonna make sure that I'm still connected to the topic here, but the ring's corruption hurts the most when it goes after people with the purest of hearts. We know that ourselves. In fact, we know for a fact that Frodo could not escape corruption in the end, and you could argue that Frodo was under that corruption the whole time. You could debate that if you really wanted to, and there is a case to be made for it. In fact, Tolkien himself has even mentioned that Sam is genuinely the real hero of the story.
Yeah. Sam is the GOAT. Sam is absolute like best side character.
Sam is next level MVP.
Sorry, James, was I interrupting you?
No. He's not a side character. He's not for him. Like Frodo would never have made it to Mordor.
Mm-hmm.
He carried literally and figuratively
on his back. His back. It's like, you see, the thing that we do have to ask on this subject too, if you ask me, is just the question of corruption and what does it really mean? Because corruption comes in many shapes and forms. Like it can affect not just heroes, it can also affect the villains by definition. So like, where does this corruption end up taking them? And it's usually people with the strongest of hearts and convictions that are the most vulnerable to this corruption to begin with. That's why the extreme of anti-villain and anti-hero even exists in the first place, is because the corruption is there in some shape or form in these particular characters, depending on their circumstances. So bringing it back to the One Piece D&D, how the really good, nice character got corrupted, and it's the saddest thing to ever see. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because we know deep down that this person is kind. They clearly have the best of intentions, but the world has dealt them so cruelly to the point where now they're taking a more extreme means to reach their ends. Like their fundamental ideology and beliefs have not changed. Their methods of doing it, on the other hand, has changed.
I'd say I've got going to that. I definitely, because we before we mentioned Warcraft, but I think Arthur Cements definitely fits that, because he literally starts off very good, literally a paladin who's in the Alliance, one of the most purest people, and then he starts going down particularly a dark path when basically dealing with the scourge and realized what was causing it, which then led to his decision of purging an entire town that was infected, which ultimately turned his teacher and his lover against him. But he still went ahead with that and burnt the entire place to the ground, slaughtering everyone so they wouldn't turn into the undead, and then pursued one behind it to the frozen north, and then literally betrayed all his men by preventing them from returning to Lordran. And then the only friend he had left, I think it was Bronzebeard, by finding Frostmourne, and by the time he had that sword, basically whoever you were playing as at the beginning of the game was dead by then. He was just this cold, literal lich lord at that point.
It's the thing when heroes make the transition to villains is, people may simply assume that they have become an entirely different character, when in all actuality, the seeds were there from the start. There is a very thin line between someone being a savior and being the freaking devil themselves. There's a very thin line between these two. Like the antagonist that I have been writing fundamentally has not changed from when they were made a savior of humanity. They have not changed at all. The problem that most people didn't see is that they failed to see the fallout in their ideology and their beliefs. The character is simply following it to the logical conclusion, because when we ascribe specific beliefs and notions of how a hero or a villain behaves, you then have to confront what ends up happening when the villain, when the heroic person becomes the very thing that they sought to destroy. Perhaps what people should have realized is that when you have an ill-defined belief on what defines a perfect world, you have to ask the question of, well, how are we supposed to get there?
Yeah.
Well, when the savior comes with an answer that you don't like, you're going to have to do something about that, because there is a good chance the savior has already tricked everyone into believing, or not even tricked, they have convinced them that their way is the only way. Hence, why you have to consider the difference between henchmen. Do you have true believers? Do you have people who are going along with it because they see no other way? Or do you have people who have no idea what the hell is going on at this point?
No, that's true. I feel like I had something pretty important to say between them, but it's fine. If it comes back in.
That was a long rant.
Yeah.
Nah, it was good. It was a really good topic, honestly.
I kind of get into this stuff. Let's say.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have much to talk about in that regard. Like apart from Arthur's, my mind was completely blank.
It was a perfect example, though. Like, I'd give more examples of my writing, but I prefer to keep that close to my chest if I I'm
definitely the same way. I prefer, like, especially because I think I've proved in like the chat, I am really bad at explaining my shit.
I know. Like in my head, it's like I have all these thoughts, especially because of my stuff. The closer things come to me, I have a harder time explaining it. It's really I've actually
had a hard time explaining stuff as well. I even recently tried to discuss a battle fight scenario to a friend. And I don't think he was really understanding it. So I was I just gave up. It's hard to explain. I have this really cool idea. It's a really cool idea for a fight. And he's like, but how does it work? Like, that don't make sense or something.
That's it. At that point, you got to tell your friend, that's why I'm writing it, damn it. God.
Yes, exactly. That's why I'm writing it.
Everywhere it'll make sense, damn it.
Everything will make sense soon, please. I think
makes sense.
Yeah, nah. I think I kind of remember what I was gonna say. I think it's about the corruption of like a pure character compared to Lord. He's probably not totally corrupted. He's probably good, but he's got like, I guess like a Ned Stark, for example, where he's not totally corrupted, but you know, he kind of knows enough about these certain things. I think the reason why it's so tragic for what happens so quickly or so tragically for a pure character is because the way I say it's kind of like, you know, when your body, it grows antibodies to illnesses. And say if you grew up not being exposed to any of them in any point in time, and then suddenly you get thrown into the Fleabag streets of, I don't know, whatever place, you're just gonna catch. You're not gonna stand a chance. You know what I mean?
You aren't.
Because it's just all alien to you all at once. Instead of being slowly getting immune to it, you get used to one over time. I think that's the reason why it makes sense, although there's total opposite and they get corrupted, and why it's so tragic when it happens. Because like there's this pure thing, but it's like because it's too pure, it wasn't ready to resist or it didn't have time to make sense of the stuff that they're seeing. It all happened to him too quickly, and and it's just like they just broke before they could like build themselves up. Actually, no, I think that's another way to put it. Sorry, like because like, you know, when you say, you know, you have an argument with someone and then they like everyone, when you have a point, you kind of, especially if you believe in it, you kind of put your identity into that. And then when it gets broken, it's like that breaks a part of you. And I think that's sometimes, even if you probably back in your head think, oh, he makes sense, you probably wouldn't want to agree with him unless you really dealt with your character and you kind of like open, you could do.
Right.
And I can imagine like a character who's so believes like they're in their purity and everything, and the world is like this, they've probably never been exposed to the opposite side, and all of a sudden it all hits them at once. they have not had the time to mentally recover and say, okay, it's not like this, but I can kind of understand it like this. They have not time to build themselves back up. Therefore, when they go through that whole arc and they just break, it's tragic and it makes sense.
I can think of something even scarier than just the typical corruption. I can just think of, and I'm glad you mentioned a pure thing. What if that person never loses that purity? You have a character what if that person never loses it?
Or something from Hunter x Hunter.
Told you. Like, think about this for a minute. Like, instead of someone who loses to corruption, they simply get consumed by their own purity to the point where there's nothing else. They don't see anything else because they simply refuse to take anything else into consideration. So they hold on to that purity and then use it to march over as many people as possible. That's what makes, if you ask me, that is even scarier than corruption.
That is scary, actually.
I think I've actually got a antagonist in my end game. That's literally that.
That's my antagonist. That's the scary thing. She literally never changed. She's still that pure little girl who never grew up past 16 because of what she was built, because of what she was born to do. And now she is refusing to accept anything else. So anytime the subject of corruption ever comes up with this character, I basically tell them they literally have not changed. It is impossible for them to, not only just because of how they were raised, but they're just by their very nature. I think that's the scariest stuff that you can think of. Someone that's driven by pure reason and logic on their own perspective. Incorruptible logic is way scarier than corruptible logic, if you ask me. Because corruptible implies that corruptible implies that there's intervention. You can stop it.
But now I'm trying to thinking of examples right here as well. Have you ever seen and I keep, whenever I bring up this discussion, I keep thinking, have you guys seen this thing or this thing? But
that's just a little bit. That's, you kind of get examples, a good way to kind of like bring it perspective.
I kind of forgot what this Jujutsu, not
Jujutsu Kaisen.
No, not Jujutsu Kaisen.
No? Okay.
What is it called again?
What are you thinking of?
Not Kikkai Sensen, or it starts with it's basically a battle. It's an anime where it's a battle royale, where each character is a representation of the Chinese New Year animal. So there's the monkey, the tiger, the bunny, and all that stuff.
Oh, I think I do know that one.
Was it anime only?
I don't know its name.
I think both anime and manga.
I don't know.
I don't remember the name.
It's been a while, but
Zodiac?
Zodiacs, sort of, but yeah. Wait, I know the person who did it also wrote Monogatari. So if I find the author, if I know the Nisio Isin is the author.
Junei Taisen.
Yes,
probably. Is that,
yes, that's it. Junni Taisen, exactly. That is the one. Sorry, I have to bring up the anime just to give it credit. Zodiac War. Yeah, that's what it's called. But it's exactly what you brought up right here. I would say, what was it? Not Lester. Kite. Yeah, exactly. What you brought up with the whole purity thing, I think it would be very applicable. It's probably, I don't know if it's the closest to your definition, but it's still, I feel like I would argue it would apply. But there's the character of the rabbit, exactly, the rabbit, who's basically this like young kind of, I don't know, teenage boy. I don't know if he's a teenage, but he looks like a young man. Okay, he's a young guy. He's like literally all he has like no shirt, just like pants, and it's the most scuffed looking character you have ever seen. If you ever search for rabbit Junni Taisen, yeah,
I was like
he looks freaky.
Jacob, sound like Jacob from Twilight.
Yeah, he's really it's creepy, bro. He's freaky, and basically it's his entire motivation, because this is a battle royale where the winner basically gets one wish, right? And that wish is achieved. And his whole shtick is that he's a necromancer, and it's super creepy because like when he kills a character, he basically revives them as a zombie, and he calls them his friend. You know, like, you are my friend now. I'll make you my friend. And literally his wish is that he wants to make everyone in the world his friend, and it's so scary
my
to think.
dear God.
It's scary to think what that even implies. You know,
you see, that is exactly what I am talking about. It's like we have these nebulous ideas that fundamentally don't mean any harm because everybody wants a friend, right? Well, what is that person's definition of friend that we're talking about here? You know, it's like
it's so screwed.
You see, this is what makes purity just as frightening as corruption. That this is kind of veering into another topic altogether. I feel like we could probably answer one question before we wrap up. But what I do want to mention though, on top of the subject of anti-heroes and anti-villains, consider the concept of purity and just honesty in general, because dishonesty doesn't necessarily have to be the only thing that makes someone dangerous. It's just how honest and earnest they are that can also be a problem. Because the thing about honesty and being earnest in general is that it means that you know what you want and you make no secrets about it. But because you make no secrets about it, it means that you don't have anything to hide. But it also implies that you have no trouble doing what you have to do to get what you want. And that's what makes someone horrifying too. Someone can be scary because they're very good at tricking people, but someone can be just as horrifying in a sense that they don't make what they want a secret. Someone. I mean, I think one of the best cases of this is in Fullmetal Alchemist, where Barry the Chopper just flat out tells Al he doesn't have a reason for doing what he does, other than he just likes killing people. That's it. He kills, therefore he is. Like, some would say that is a very one-dimensional person, but I'm like, yes, that's frightening. You're living in a world where everyone has to like think about what they want, but then all of a sudden there's this one person who somehow knows everything that what they want. They have no questions. There's like no debate. It's just like, no, I just want to do this.
Yeah, just think about. Imagine trying to reason with someone like that.
You're probably not going to get anywhere. You're not going to get anywhere with them because they've already decided what they want. So you can say, for example, like, just to kind of mention this, let's say you have a villain that believes in, I just want order where the world can live in peace. I'm like, okay, that sounds cool. What does that imply? It basically means that I am going to determine the course of humanity all by myself. Wait, so does that mean that you are you're going to be taking away everybody else's agency while you determine what's best for them? Yes, actually. And their response to that is, well, nobody really wants any response. No one really wants responsibility, so I'm taking that burden off your back. I will treat you like my children. I will cradle you. I will take on everything. Like, okay, so how exactly are you going to do that? Because it sounds like
kill half the world. That will make it work. Some crazy like that. Yo, what the flip? Yeah,
exactly. Scary stuff, ain't it?
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Actually, talking about this made me realize, I don't know, because I don't really categorize my villains like that, but I've talking about this made me realize, I guess my last villain is kind of like that, because he's always, his mindset has never changed, and this is what's brought everything to this point, so, I just never thought about that.
I'm wondering, given, the amount of antagonists I have, I don't think I have someone quite like that yet.
Trust me, they are a lot of fun to write about. They're so
I've got
they're so honest.
I've got one that is just literal chaos.
But I want to kill chaos.
That is literally.
Oh no!
Chaos.
Jack in the chat.
I need a Jack as well. Jack.
Yeah.
Jack in the chat.
I'm sorry. I had to bring it up. Continue.
Because with both my series, I was chosen serendipity. I basically it's literally what villain I think is cool, and I put it in. But obviously, I don't try to make it random. I just always make sure it fits.
It's kind of a vibe. It's one you'll be inspired by something, and then you kind of write it inspired by something. Yeah, that's why with that.
And so a lot of them, particularly in Goddesses Chosen, my current arc, you can't really call who they're fighting as straight up villains, because they are.
Oh, it's a lot more complicated. Yeah,
because it's a lot more complicated than that. like Alyssa and her party are literal just end up there, and in Alyssa's case, literally but against her will.
Mm-hmm.
And now that so and it's kind of because like that arc's like pretty much based off of like what I got from Skype here. But that's enough of me rambling.
Nah, but yeah, like,
Yeah, it's great.
Oh,
Oh,
I think
Yeah.
we have. I think our subjects today were actually really, really good.
yeah, no, really.
I guess it was villain oriented. This one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely villain
Yeah.
oriented.
Yeah,
can
we've come back to start a villain like that's why.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
say that. So,
No.
the next time we meet up, though, like there are some other interesting questions here that I
Yeah.
do think we should talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
For example, I do want us to talk about planning versus mind dumping, as well as
Yeah.
why fanfics are
Yeah,
popular,
that's a
especially the world building topic, and why fanfic is so popular among women.
Yeah.
Now, I understand the irony of me wanting to do that, considering that I am a man myself, but I can. I have
We can make
some.
fails
I
a
feel
bit.
like a personal
definitely
opinion.
want to talk about fights at some point,
Yeah.
but that can wait.
Yeah. Personal opinion, but I do think because what was it? I do think for that whole fanfic thing, why it's popular, it might be pretty good to have a female opinion on this.
Yeah,
which is
I-
water
I
in this
have to
case.
agree with that because-
because I
Yeah.
don't think I could add much.
Yeah.
I've
'cause,
got
like-
my
Yeah.
opinions on fanfics.
Yeah.
Which I'll probably speak about, but it's
Yeah.
it's sort
Yeah,
of a
like-
mix between I generally hate them, but I will never discourage people to write them. Well, I'll get more into it like when we actually get to the topic, but that's basically
Yeah,
spoiler
like,
to my thoughts
like-
on it.
yeah, like, cause like, while I have a notion of it, I can't speak for a woman.
Yeah.
I really can't.
I don't have much of an opinion on it either. I just I've read a few. It's not some naughty ones, but that's it. And that was like a long time ago. That's in the past.
Base,
but I
base
would
text.
say, but I would say
I'm different now.
I'm different now. But-
That's probably the reason
Yeah.
why I don't like
But,
them.
yeah.
That's what they are.
But it would be. I want to bring up something. Sorry, fast. But now I've kind of lost it. So why did I even talk? Why did I... Oh yeah. What was it? I would say personally, I feel like villains are probably a weakness for me, but that's also because I don't think I've written a lot of villains in my stories personally, and I only have experience from watching and probably like I guess analyzing villains. But that's something something to work on for sure. So
I will
it was
say-
good to have this discussion in a way. It was good to have this
I will
discussion.
say final point for me in terms of writing villains, they can actually be very fun to write. Like honestly, I love writing my villains.
Hmm.
Yeah, same.
That's-
Yeah, I don't know. I think villains just because it's for me. I always kind of think about villains. It's not necessarily that they're doing bad. It's they probably have like a good idea, but they take it to the extreme.
Right.
So that's how they usually write. And then I guess the other one, if another way is looking at it is like, well, you got a good guy, and here's their goal. How can you make that goal the most annoying thing to get? Oh, make someone who's just literally just the arse of their the bane of their existence.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just thought of this right now. This is like literally just this moment. I just started brainstorming for a second, and I thought of this idea, and it's very weird. Right now, actually, this could be split into two topics. Maybe we could save it for another time. It depends.
Yeah.
But
Like I've got to go. That's
Yeah.
pretty soon. So.
Sorry. I'll just bring it up. I'll bring it up. But let's say when you're starting off with a story, how important is it to think up of a main antagonist or villain in the story? Like, how important do you prioritize that as the first thing, or wait on it?
I'm sorry. I'm being kind of picky here. We should mention that there is a marked difference between a villain and an antagonist. We should mention that just in case.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting topic.
But still, I mean, that's why I said it's villain or antagonist, like slash.
There you go.
Kind of.
So sorry about that. That was just my hair trigger going off.
Yeah, no problem. But yeah, but that's because I've been thinking about the villain for a long time, but because of thinking about the main villain for too long, now I've sort of that's what I mean. Like it's become my weakness because I've only been thinking about one villain, the main villain, and I want to make it good. But that also causes me to lose the creativity. They lose the creativity for thinking up of different type of villains that I could have earlier on in the story. That is kind of because I'm focusing on one, which is going to be the last. And now I'm considering: is it really important to think about this right now, or can I save it? For later.
That's why I mentioned earlier that if you're going to do this, you really have to think about what the themes of your story are going to be like and what the villain can represent in the grand scheme of that theme. Because if you are writing a story where it just boils down to a concept of life, death, or respect for life in general, what does your villain represent in that conversation? Do they represent the opposite, or do they represent a logical extreme?
Yeah,
like that will definitely help, because sometimes when you have that as your theme, or when you have a specific theme, your villain can become the embodiment of either extreme at that point.
Okay, all right, awesome. It's been a good stream, honestly, guys. It was it was a really good stream. Next time we'll be covering fanfics and maybe more villain stuff. There's actually a lot to unpack here. But in the meantime, this is Nathaniel, and it's been Hex, Kite, and Shonen, Lester. Beat, he was beat as well. He was here, but he had to go. But awesome stuff, guys. All right, it's been good. See you next time. All right, bye.
See ya.
Bye.